Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started now. There's food behind us. There's dessert in front of us. Welcome to the grand finale of 2017 Summer Dine and Learn. Shkoyach, thank you so much to Moshe for arranging it the whole summer. Thank you to the Krieger family for sponsoring tonight. Thank you for all the sponsors throughout the summer and for everyone who has come throughout the summer, vacation allowing. It's been it's an honor and a privilege for me to continue the series. So we've done Sefer Vayikra. It's kedai if you have an extra hand or clean hands, it's kedai to have a chumash, a sheet for this week of Bechuk Kosai, and a sheet for all of Vayikra because we're going to be skipping around a bit. It'll help you keep up. We have a lot to cover, not that much time to cover in. This is the final week, so we got to finish everything. So let's get going. I made a mistake already on the sheet. The first two psukim of Perek Chavav are not in Bechuk Kosai, and arguably they're in the wrong Perek. And whoever did split up the prakim really should have put it in the previous Perek, but whatever. So I kept it in here for this week. So two prakim in Bechuk Kosai, Chavav and Chav Zayin. Chavav is the brachas and the kolos. It's a tochacha. It's Hashem saying if you follow all the halachas, then you'll be blessed, and if Khalilah they don't follow the halachas, then they will be cursed. And there are three, you can tell from the language that there are three brachos in general, even though there are multiple psukim. Each one has vinosati. And I put those in brackets, 1, 2, and 3, to show where the three brachos are. And the klolos, there are 5 of them, and you can tell because it's v'im lo tishmeu, v'im telcho imi keri. The v'ims are each separate curses. And then what happens at the end, after all this, at the very end of Perek Chavav, is Pasuk Mem, begins it all, is the Geula. What's going to happen in the Geula? So, Vizvadu Savonam Savon Avosam will do tshuva, and then Hashem will bring us all back. And the Ramban says, so there are two main tochachos in the Torah. There's the one here in Bechuk Kosai, and then the other in Devarim Chav Ches. So the Ramban explains that this one, the one in Vayikra, is talking about the Bayis Rishon, when there was the Galus from Bayis Rishon, and the one in Devarim Chav Ches is talking about the Galus after Bayis Sheni, which has continued ad Hayom Hazeh. Okay, that was quick. Perek Chav Zayin. Perek Chav Zayin is a puzzle. Perek Chavav, the brachos and the klolos, it makes sense to be sort of an epilogue for Sefer Vayikra. We learned all about the Kedusha, all about the Shechina, all about bringing a Kodesh Baruch Hu into us. And so that Perek is telling us what happens if we do and what happens if we don't. It makes sense. It sort of sums it all up. So why doesn't it end there? Why is there a Perek Chav Zayin? Perek Chav Zayin, you can see in the summary, it's a little, seems a little out of place. It talks about Arachim. Right? Or as in yeshivas we call it erchin. If someone is makdish, if he dedicates an animal, a person, a house to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Mishkan, so how much does he pay? How does he do the payment? And then from there, from erchin, it goes to bechor, it goes to acherim, and then it goes to meiser. What's it doing here? Why is it here? There are different theories. There are different theories about what Perek Chav Zayin is all about. So one theory, Rabbi Joseph Hertz, that the Pentateuch Chumash. So his theory is that Sefer Vayikra begins with talking about the sanctuary regulations, the laws around the Mishkan. So it was fitting to end with similar sanctuary regulations. I mean, the problem is with that is that it doesn't actually begin with sanctuary regulations and doesn't end with sanctuary. It begins with the korbanos, talking about the korban olah, the korban chatas. Not really regulations. And this is talking about if you want to donate money to the Mishkan, not really regulations either. Okay. So another theory is that it begins with a Mishkan and it ends with a Mishkan. Again, so it begins with a Mishkan, so you have to bring the korbanos. So where does the korbanos come from? Right? We have a few members of the shul board here. So you can't talk about a shul and tell people how to run a shul without telling them where does the money come from. You need the finances, otherwise there's no shul. You need the finances, otherwise there's no Mishkan. So it ends, Sefer Vayikra ends by telling us where the money comes from to run this whole Sefer Vayikra, it has to be financed somehow. They don't issue bonds on the cash flow of the Mishkan. No, they from Arachin. So it's a good theory, but what's missing here? What's missing here is actually the bulk of the finance, which is a machatzis shekel. If you're going to talk about the finances of the Mishkan, you need to talk about the machatzis shekel, and that's not here. So I don't like this theory so much. Another theory is that this is what they call a literary filler. You see that in Haftarah sometimes. You don't want to end on a bad note. So you stick something at the end that's kind of good. So with the Haftarah, what do? We repeat the previous pasuk so that we don't end on a bad note. So here they added in a little few halachos at the end so we don't add on the note of the klalos. That's, I think, a very prominent theory, and I, Bichlal, don't understand it. Look at Perek Chavav. We just talked about it. What's the end of Perek Chavav? The Geula, exactly. That's beautiful. That is a perfect note to end the Sefer. Why would you think you need to fill it with anything else? End it there. Boom. So I don't like that theory so much.
Where the Geula starts from? Where again?
Perek Chavav, let's say Pasuk Mem, about there. And you keep going. It's all about good things. V'zacharti is Brisi Yaakov, V'av is Brisi Yitzchak.
Why do you call it restoration in a new category?
The Geula means restoration. They were brought back and they restored all the good things in Eretz Yisrael. You could call it redemption. So another theory is that this is actually a continuation of Perek Chaf Hey, when it talks about the Yovel, and then here we're talking about a house, about a field. So it's a continuation of Chaf Hey, and though that was broken up to put the brachas of klalos in there. Okay, good. Here's an interesting theory, a bit of a hashkafa theory. What are the brachas and the klalos really about? It's about Hashem fulfilling His promises, His vows to us about how He's going to run the world. Hashem vows to us. He makes a covenant, a bris, and He says, if you do good, good things will happen. If you do bad, bad things will happen, and I will fulfill it. So Perek Chav Zayin is Hashem telling us, if we make nidarim, if we make vows, we have to fulfill it also. If we say, we promise this to Hashem, a house, a field, or whatever, so then we have to fulfill it. So it's saying that this is a two-way street. It's a covenant, it's a bris. And just like Hashem has to fulfill His nidarim, we have to fulfill our nidarim also. I like that. It's a little, maybe not pshat, but I like it. But then we still have a problem. The problem is Meiser at the very end. So Cherem is if there's some sort of a Cherem, it has to go to Hashem. Good. But Meiser Behema, there's no neder, there's no human action involved there. Meiser on a produce, right? So 1/10 of the produce that we grow, we have to give. And then 1/10 of our animals, we have to belong to Hashem also. So what is this doing here? I have a theory. Let's go back to Vayikra Yud, Perek Yud. If you flip in your Chumashim or you look on your Vayikra overview sheets, what happens there is something very sad. Nadav and Avihu. They bring an Eish Zara into the Mishkan, and they're killed. So why is it in the middle of all the halachos, this story? There are actually only two stories in the entire Sefer Vayikra. This story of Nadav and Avihu. Anyone remember the other? It's Megadef, the Ben Ish Yisraelis and Ish Misri. Two stories in the entire Sefer. So what's it doing here? So you could say, well, Nadav and Avihu happened on that day. It's a chronological story. Okay, you could say that. But it doesn't have to be in order, because even the Ramban, right, we said this many times over the summer, even the Ramban who says the Chumash goes in order, if it tells us it's out of order, then that's okay. The Chumash is allowed to tell us it's out of order. So why didn't they take the story of Nadav and Avihu, put it in Bamidbar with all the other stories, and tell us the day that it happened? Why is it in Vayikra? I think there's something more here. Now, what did they do wrong? So this is a question that launched 1,000 drashas. So Nadav and Avihu brought a wrong korban. Yeah, okay, you can fine. Fine. I'm going to say my own drasha, Shia. That's good. So what was the avera that Nadav and Avihu did? What do they do? What do they do wrong? It's not clear at all. And the Torah Shlema brings 17 different explanations from Midrashim and from commentators, from Mefarshim. So, okay, so we don't have to explain what the problem was, But the question I have is, why doesn't the Torah tell us? Why is it vague? And I think the answer is because it's not important. So we talked about, all the way at the beginning, Vayikra Perek Aleph to Hey, and Vayikra Perek Vav to Zayin. Right? And our overview, we say that Aleph to Hey are the laws of sacrifices, and Vav to Zayin are the instructions for priests. Because really, everything in Aleph to Hey is repeated. 5 prakim are repeated in the next 2 prakim. So why is that? So the Mefarshim explain, the Ramban explains, Aleph to Hey are the instructions to Klal Yisrael, and Vav to Zayin are the instructions to the Kohanim. So why? That doesn't actually answer the question. That answers technically why is it repeated, but it doesn't answer, so why? Why is it repeated? So here's something interesting. Historians tell us that in the ancient world, when sacrifices were brought, a person would bring a sacrifice, give it to the priest, and that was the end of it. It now belonged to the priest, and the priest did everything. And they contrast that to the Torah's view of sacrifices. If we bring a korban, whatever that korban is, so first of all, we're allowed to do some of the worship, some of the sacrifice, some of the avodah, we're allowed to do. Shechita is kosher bazar. We're allowed to slaughter the animal of a korban. And some of the korbanos, we stick around and we eat it. And that didn't happen in the other religions. Because in Klal Yisrael, our view of the Torah's view of korbanos is very different than the view of the other religions. To us, everybody has a chilek, everybody has a part in the korbanos. Whether you're a Kohen or not, you have a part in the korbanos.
What do you mean?
A literal part, you can eat it. But even,
All korbanos are consumed by the person.
right, some you could eat. But even the ones that aren't, we have a role in them, and therefore we can watch them, and we can even participate in some of them, which does not happen outside of the Torah.
You mean other religions?
Other religions in the ancient world, it was not participatory. If you're not a priest, you don't touch it. You bring it, and that's it. You're done. They didn't.
So you eat it.
They didn't eat it. They didn't shecht it. They weren't allowed to shecht it. Other religions are not allowed to shecht the korbanos.
The person, okay, are you indicating that a person can shecht their own korban?
Yes, shechita is kosher bazar. Non-Kohen is allowed to shecht a korban. So I think there's a political reason for this, and by political, I mean social, the way people interact. And I'm not trying to say that the Torah is offering any political advice. I'm trying to explain what's going on in the Torah through this device. So Athens, in ancient Athens, when they had a political issue, everybody had a vote. The entire town could go into the big hall, they'd argue it out, everyone was allowed to speak, and everyone had a vote. And who was it? It was Plato thought this was crazy. Some people are informed. Some people follow the news and understand the politics, and some people have no idea. Some people wandering off the street. And why, Plato asks, does someone who is informed, who is intelligent, who is scholarly, have the same vote as someone who knows nothing? Doesn't understand a thing. It doesn't make sense.
Women also? Women also?
Well, no, not women, not slaves. It's a different time. And so what it's all about is a struggle to, on the one hand, control. So if only the elites had power, if only the elites could vote, so that lends itself to abuse. Lends itself, for them, power corrupts. It's just a fact. And if everybody has a vote, so that lends itself to just ignorance and the rule of the mob. So this is always a struggle in politics. No one has ever figured out how to solve it. The way we resolve it in the United States is, on the one hand, we have the Senate, which have longer terms. It's supposed to be the elite. And on the other hand, you have the House of Representatives, which is supposed to be the voice of the people. Now, after the 200 and how many years? 250 or so years, it's not really working so well. Professional politicians and all of that, they're all elites to some degree. Not everybody. You have Tea Party members and whatnot. Maybe not so good. So the Torah, in its own way, is addressing this problem. Because if the Kohanim have too much power, what's going to end up happening is they abuse the power. And we see it in Navi. The sons of Eli abuse the power of the Kohanim. So the way the Torah tries to prevent it, it's hard to prevent human frailty. Human frailty is just a fact. But before we go there, let's interesting development. Chazanim. Why are there no chazanim anymore? Very few chazanim. Very, very few. Used to be every shul had a chazan. Now you don't. So it comes up as a shaila on Rosh Hashanah. Are you allowed to make kiddush before shofar blowing? So some of the Rabbanim say we have to make kiddush because shul ends so late, people are going to collapse. Obviously, they don't collapse on Yom Kippur, but for some reason they're going to collapse on Rosh Hashanah, and they're going to complain at least. It's hard. I agree, it's hard. So the other Rabbanim say, okay, so end earlier. Tell the Chazanim to cut it out. You know how it goes. There's some Chazanim, and I grew up with this type of Chazan. They go on forever. Yeah, you pay if you pay enough for the ticket, you want the show. So you know what? There aren't too many people who want to pay those tickets anymore, and that's why they're going out, because the Chazanim, not all of them, but too many Chazanim took advantage of the power, and they didn't remember the number one lesson, which is the customer is always right. And they took too long, and they schlepped it out, and people said, forget it, we don't need them. So what's the other option, which you see in many shuls, is you need a volunteer to go up. So the problem with, first of all, if you're the gabbai, finding volunteers is not always so easy. And second of all, not everyone who goes up to volunteer is capable. Chazan, is capable. Every guy who goes up to the Amud, myself, at the front of the line, when I go up to the Amud, I know I'm not capable. And it's a struggle. It's a balance between, number one, maintaining control, and number two, maintaining limitations on the power. So the way the Torah does it with Kohanim is it gives Yisrael, number one, a chelik, a portion in the karbanos, and number two, it regulates the Kohanim. And we see that is what goes on throughout Sefer Vayikra. So the first 7 prakim, number one, is telling Klal Yisrael, these karbanos are for you. And so what happens in Perek Yud? After all the halachas of karbanos, what do we learn? The limitations on the Kohanim. Nadav and Avihu, that whole story of Nadav and Avihu is telling the Kohanim, watch out, guys. If you take one wrong step, that's the end of it. It's telling the Kohanim they have to respect their limitations. Vayikra Yud Tes. If we flip to Perek Yud Tes. So what is that? Kedoshim to you.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yes.
The Kohanim were corrupt, and they died every year because they weren't.
The Kohanim Gedolim were corrupt. Right.
You think they come to their senses and realize maybe they shouldn't be going Gadol and do their own thing and die this year?
They thought it was the norm, though.
So why in the second temple didn't the Kohanim Kohanim Gedolim, why do they think they were different? Everyone thinks they're different, right? Every year, the new Kohen Gadol, they fail to learn from history and they think, I'm different, it's not going to happen to me, and then it happens to them. So why are they so foolish? I don't know either.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
How many did they go these guys?
Even if they're Tzedukim, I mean, you remember what happened last year, right? Even if Tzeduki remembers what happened the previous year. I don't know. That's a separate question. It's a good question. I don't know.
But you think that should rein in their behavior in terms of their realizing there's punishment, and it didn't.
But the power blinds them. So.
I guess, yeah, I don't know. I mean, everybody thinks they're different.
How many Kohanim were switched?
I remember, I don't remember. There's a list somewhere of how many Kohanim Gedolim there were in the second base of
There
Mikdash.
were a lot.
20, 30, something like that.
When they get yanked out after the Avoda in the base of Mikdash, because they changed how they did the Torah there.
And remember, Yochanan Kohen Gadol was a Kohen Gadol for what, 80 years or something like that?
Yeah,
So
right until the last year, they saw the string change.
right, I'm just saying there are a lot of Kohanim Gedolim. He had 80 years, and then you had a bunch for all the other years. Someone else had a question? Yeah, go ahead.
How's it going to be about the power of the Kohanim?
It's about them having to follow the regulations. The rules of the Kohanim are highly regulated. And if they take one step out of line, they're chayav bisa, and boom, it happened. At the very beginning. To teach us that. And that's why it's kept in Sefer Vayikra, so that every Kohen who ever learns will know they can't step a toe out of line. Okay.
Whatever the reason is.
Vayikra Yud Tes, remember we talked about, that's the rules for Kedusha for all of Klal Yisrael. And then not long after that is Perek Chav Aleph, Parshas Emor, which is rules of the Kedusha for the Kohanim. Why do Klal Yisrael come first? So one part of it is that Kohanim are Yisraelim, so they have to follow everything of that. But also telling us, just like we saw at the very beginning of the Sefer, that Yisrael are really the main people that Sefer Vayikra is about. Remember, at the very first week, we talked about what's the best name for the Sefer. Is it Vayikra or is it Torah's Kohanim? Torah's Kohanim means that the focus is on the Kohen. Vayikra, we said, means that it's on all of Klal Yisrael. So there is a reason that we call it Vayikra, because the whole theme of this is the primacy of all Klal Yisrael. We all have a role in the avoda. So let's go back to Perek Chav Zayin. Switch sheets if you want in Vayikra. So here's the story. When I was in yeshiva, so we were learning. I think it was Bava Metzia, and Rav Meir Tursky, Shlita, my Rebbe, was giving a lamdish shir on Meiser Behema. Is it a chiyuv in the Gavra, or is it a chiyuv in the Chefza? Meaning, the 10th animal, the Meiser Behema. So is it that animal has to be brought to the Mishkan, to the Beis HaMikdash, so anyone who finds it, the chiyuv is on the animal, or is it on the owner that he has to take specifically this animal to the Beis HaMikdash?
Why would you say it on any mitzvah then?
So that's why briskers can earn a living, because they have to explain that in every single mitzvah. So we're talking about this mitzvah specifically, and I said, I'm a wise guy, and I brought a kasha from a pasuk. I said, well, look at the pasuk at the end of Bechukosai. Perek Chav Zayin pasuk Lamed Beis, V'chol ma'asar bakar vatzon, kol asher yavor tachas hashavet. So the 10th of all the cattle and the sheep, anything that passes under the rod, ha'asiri, the 10th, yeh kodesh l'Hashem. That is kodesh l'Hashem. So here's how it works. You have all your animals in a pen, you put out a rod, and you let them out one by one. And the 10th one out, that's Meiser Behema. And then you keep going. Always, whichever, look at the language. Kol asher yavor tachas hashovet. So what does it sound like? Does it sound like it's a chiyuv on the Gavra or a chiyuv on the Chefza? So I said, Rebbe, they don't even talk about the Gavra. All they talk about is the Chefza. So clearly it must be a chiyuv on the Chefza. So he said to me, very nice, but let's say all the animals organize themselves and slowly walk out, single file, and the 10th one walks under the rod. Is that Meiser Behema? No, you need the person. It's an obligation on the person. It's not an obligation on the animal, despite the language of the pasuk. So he had to bring other. He's saying that's not a raya, not a proof. He has other proofs. He's much more of a lamdan than I am. I tried to bring a proof from a pasuk, and he didn't think so, because if the animals organized themselves and walked under the rod, that would not be makdish the Meiser Behema. You need the person to take them out. Okay, but that doesn't answer the question. What's with the strange language of the pasuk? So I want to. You could call me a darshan on this. That's fine. I'm not saying this is necessarily pshuto shel mikra. I think it's an interesting question. So here's what I'd like to say. And I think this pasuk is the story of all of Sefer Vayikra, which is why we end on Meiser Behema. What's this telling us about the Meiser Behema, that one animal that's kadosh? It's telling us basically just happenstance. It's a coincidence. Whichever one passes under the rod, I don't care. There's nothing special about him. But that's the one that's kadosh. Really, all the animals are good. They're all good. They're all wonderful. But this is the one that got sent to the Beis HaMikdash. So all of Sefer Vayikra is talking about the kedusha of all of Klal Yisrael. But what do we know about all of Klal Yisrael? That there are some people who have more kedusha, have more laws, and they work in the Beis HaMikdash. So what's special about these people? Why do they deserve to be Kohanim and we don't? So I've said many times over the summer, you can't argue with a fact. A fact is not fair. A fact is a fact, even if it's not fair. So the fact that Kohanim, that someone is born to this lineage of Aaron HaKohen, and that's why they're Kohanim, that's not fair. But it doesn't matter. You need someone to work in the Beis HaMikdash, and these Kohanim are the ones who worked in the Beis HaMikdash. And you can't argue, just like you can't argue on this 10th animal. He's the one who came out 10th. So too you can't argue on the Kohanim. It's not that they're necessarily better Jews. It's not that they had some zechus themselves that they get to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. That's just the fact of the matter. And facts don't have to be fair. And just so I'm saying that Meiser Behema, I was suggesting That's the theme of all of Sefer Vayikra, that it's really not just Torah's Kohanim, but it's Vayikra on all of Klal Yisrael. And the fact that we have Kohanim is not necessarily good or bad. It's just a fact because we need someone to work in the Beis HaMikdash. Adkan. So thank you very much for indulging me while I learn Sefer Vayikra. And I really appreciate everybody coming and participating in all the questions and